Welcome to Royce Moore's Griffin Greats. My name is Adrienne Finley Odell, and I am the head of school here, and I am delighted to welcome Josh Friedberg, alum from the class of 2006, as our guest today. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrienne, and hope everything is going well at Royce Moore. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, let me introduce you for those of you who are watching today who don't know Josh. Josh is a writing tutor, teacher, TEDx speaker, and music historian. After graduating from Royce Moore in 2006, he attended Earlham College, where he blossomed socially and discovered his passion for essay writing and for helping others. A lifelong music fan, he writes about music on his Substack blog and is a staff writer for the pop culture journal Pop Matters. He has won and judged multiple awards in the National Federation of Press Women's Annual Communications Contests, and he earned a master's degree in English from Northeastern Illinois University in 2016. He's tutored writing for college students from a wide range of backgrounds since 2014, and he currently teaches at North Park University in Chicago. His writing has also been featured in two books: the 25th anniversary edition of Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, which is awesome, and The Decision to Heal: Pathways from Suffering to Love. Love that. His 2020 TEDx talk, Redefining Creativity as an Autistic Person, is available online, so check it out. Among the highlights of his time at Royce Moore are his January short-term project in 2004, and Greg Cott, the Chicago Tribune rock critic. His presenting the 2006 yearbook faculty dedication to Jeff Giles, and his sixth grade science fair project on radon. Boy, you had a full time here at Royce Moore, and you've just continued to soar since graduating. Josh, what a wonderful career you've had so far.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a wild ride in a lot of ways, but I'm very grateful for a lot of the opportunities that Royce Moore gave me. And I'm trying to think where to start. Well, you can go in with your questions. I won't blabber on for too long, but go ahead.
Well, I would love to hear, kind of going back to your Royce Moore days. We are college preparatory school, and students go through that journey with us here as part of their process of discovering. And you decided to go to Earlham College and studied English.
Yeah.
Right? And so, what inspired that choice for you?
Well, I remember when I was a junior and senior here at Royce Moore in the high school, I think it's fair to say, obsessed with which colleges I should apply to and where I should go and what I should major in and a lot of other things. I ended up choosing Earlham in part because of the just wonderful college counselor we had here at the time. Was Peggy Klein.
Oh, yeah, Peggy.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She got me, I think, where I needed to go in a lot of ways. I needed a small environment still, but in a very different way, where more than a few hundred, or even a couple hundred students like at Royce Moore, it was about 1,000 or 1,200, somewhere in there, students at Earlham at the time. It was very, I got to know a lot of different people in a lot of different social groups. And that's part of why I say I blossomed socially there. It was hard for me in some ways at Royce Moore socially, but I know at the same time, Royce Moore gave me a lot of great opportunities that helped prepare me for Earlham, where I did blossom more socially. I got tons and tons of friends. When I graduated, when I walked at graduation in 2010, my class, hundreds of people gave me a standing ovation when I walked on stage. And I was like, where did that come from? I wasn't used to anything like that, just in my whole life, not just Royce Moore or anything like that. But the point is, I think in a smaller environment, I was able to make a bigger impact, but not just even that. I felt like it impacted me more, in a positive way, both Royce Moore and Earlham, especially in terms of writing. And if I can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, please do.
The first paper I ever wrote and turned in an Earlham in college as a freshman in 2006 had perfect grammar and all these great things I'd learned, but it didn't have as much of an argument, which is some of what they talk about in college level writing. Arguments, close reading, all this stuff that I hadn't really heard enough about, or I'd heard them in different terms in Roycemore or whatever.
Okay.
So I worked really hard to apply both the things I learned at Roycemore, especially about grammar and writing in general, especially research. Different teachers I had were really, really helpful with that.
Yeah.
And it kind of ignited my passion for research. That's like my favorite kind of project in academia is a research project, as opposed to just writing about a text and only focusing on that. But I will say that writing, especially, I realized that Roycemore is very much something that takes work.
Of course.
I thought for a long time it was just something you kind of did impulsively when you could and when you were inspired or whatever. It takes a lot of skill, but also discipline to be able to do it well and to do it in a way that focuses on whatever assignment it is. It takes time. And, some of the English teachers here, whether it was Larry Hunt or Patty Legattuta Borges or different people, they taught me a lot about the process of writing, the process of drafting and brainstorming and outlining and everything, not in that order, but
yeah.
It was very, very helpful. So I'll stop at that.
So that helped you going into college,
Yeah.
and you did a lot of writing there. I'm curious, can you share with us what prompted the standing ovation at graduation?
Well, I didn't speak there in terms of a speech or anything like that, but a lot of people just told me, like, you made a really big impact here, and I don't think you even knew it, which is true. I didn't, I didn't know. But I think part of it was that I took classes in a wide range of fields. I took classes in everything from English, history, French, African American studies, like a lot of different things, a lot of different fields and majors and things like that. But what helped me, I think, was being willing to listen more to a lot of people's experiences and also being honest about where I was at, because I couldn't understand certain kinds of experiences, but I was willing to listen. And that took some work because, like it said in my TED Talk, I'm autistic and a lot of things like that. So I've struggled, at least with my kind of autism, with listening to others and having patience and flexibility and things like that. I've worked hard to develop those things over time socially. It's not been easy, but I think the fact that a lot of people knew that I struggled growing up in some way socially, like, people realized, like, you really worked hard here, and that made a difference. I'll just say also, I worked on the newspaper. I was at the radio station there. I wrote columns and opinion pieces about music and different things at the newspaper, and had 8, 9 something semesters of, I think it was, I was there an extra semester. I think I did 8 semesters on the college radio station, which is also a public radio station in the town, and
Wow.
and got involved. And it really helped me out that I was at a smaller environment where I could do that.
Yeah, you could really shine and take on leadership opportunities that you might not have had the opportunity to do in a larger institution.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of the theme
At
at Roycemore, right? It's there's that small school equation.
Yeah.
Then you're known, right? You're not just a number. It sounds like you really took advantage of that Earlham environment to continue that arc that you started here at Roycemore.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So let's kind of fast track forward. You took all of this writing experience and then you've become a professional writer.
I guess so. I mean,
yeah. So you've published.
yeah.
Can you share with us about what inspired your writing that ended up being so acclaimed?
Let's see where to start. The biggest impetus for my writing in terms of an inspirational topic or whatever, or a topic that inspires me, is music. And I remember a lot of things that I did at Roycemore for music, whether it was choir or anything else, really, and especially my January short-term studying with Greg Cott, who was then the rock critic from the Chicago Tribune. I studied heavy metal and hip hop, which are 2 genres I don't know as much about. for 3 weeks, and it was like the highlight of my childhood. It was amazing.
Ooh. And
Um,
did you like that music and that's why you studied it, or you wanted to learn something different?
Wanted to learn something different, but I did learn to like a lot of it, so I'm
Oh,
grateful.
okay. Cool.
I grew up listening to a lot of different kinds of music, whether it was usually older styles based on what my parents were playing or anything else, like older like styles, not necessarily older artists all the time, but rock, soul, country, jazz, folk, maybe a little blues, gospel, hip hop, whatever. Like it was a range, and that part of that eclecticism is what inspires me. Um, for my writing is I feel like I have a wide range of topics I can always draw on. Now they're not just with music, but with social justice and other things and related, some things overlap. But also just writing about personal struggles I've had with autism and other things. I feel like there's a lot that I can talk about gratefully. And every because I don't write every single day the way some writers say, like, you need to write, you must, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I try to, I've trained myself to think of, to like, if I think of a certain topic, to write it down and write about it later or whatever, because I get random inspiration, but it takes some discipline to just sit down and write. Um,
Sure it does.
yeah,
Yeah. I
absolutely.
write a newsletter piece for a column for our newsletter every week. And yeah, it always takes longer
Yeah,
than I thought. I have to block out a real chunk of time for that process because good writing does, it's a thoughtful process, isn't it? Like, it's the writing, it's the rewriting, and so on.
I see we have a question. Should we wait on that or?
You can dive in if you like, sure.
Okay. Is there a musician or era that you find particularly interesting or that you like to write about? Ooh, that's a hard one because there's so many. Um, I know most, not mostly, but just like of the all the decades of the last 100 years that I've studied the most, the one I've studied the most is the 1960s, which is not to say I like that music better or think it's essentially great. If I could write a biography for someone, who would you choose? A lot of the people I think of have already have biographies written about them, so I'm not sure necessarily whom I would, want to deviate from, or want to write something new about. But if there's anybody I could dive into and listen to for the rest of my life, actually it would be a jazz singer, like Ella Fitzgerald, because
Oh,
her
yeah.
music makes me feel happy on any day of the year. When she sang, I could feel the joy, including when she sang sad songs. Like, it makes me feel better. But there have been biographies and discographies and different things about her life and films. And
Yeah,
I
there
don't
was
know
a
how this,
beautiful documentary about her on PBS this past weekend.
was it Something to Live For, or was it like the American Masters, or was it the Just One of Those Things, the newer one? Okay, I've seen probably both, but I'll
I
find out.
don't know, but at any rate, so yeah, you're an Ella Fitzgerald fan. That's great.
Yeah, and
Love
that's
her.
like an older style for sure. But of contemporary artists, well, I don't know if I'd write a book on somebody like Jason Isbell or Gillian Welch and some of the Americana older sounding artists, but I love a lot of those styles too.
Awesome, awesome. So, kind of going back to the two books that you've contributed to, what inspired that work for you?
Learning about different opportunities through writing, through websites like Freedom, I think it's called Freedom with Writing. And also, I have a friend who's a writing coach that helped me with the Decision to Heal book. We work together in a group of different writers from different places, but also like through Freedom with Writing. And I think there's also something called Authors Publish magazine or something like that that I get online subscriptions to. I
Okay.
find out about paying writing opportunities that way. Haven't had a ton of them, but Chicken Soup for the Soul was one of them, and I applied and got in. I told this story about being at an arts camp when I was 13 years old and singing and playing my guitar, and how it changed people's perceptions of me then. And funny, the same thing happened later when I was at college and at Roycemore. I sang at a talent show when I was in, I think, 10th grade, of not many acts of they had an overnighter event. I don't know if they still do that at Roycemore, but it was a upper school overnighter event. And
Yeah,
I
we don't do that
sang,
anymore.
That's fine. But
At least completely overnight. Like it might maybe kind of up to overnight, but particularly in the era of COVID,
yeah,
not a good plan.
that's legitimate. But I sang today from the Smashing Pumpkins a cappella and won, so I'm very grateful for that. That was, and I think a lot of people were just like, I didn't know you could sing, and I won't do that right now, but I'm grateful to say that it was wonderful. It was a great
I
opportunity.
love that.
Yeah.
I think it is so great when we as educators see young people take those courageous risks
Mhm.
to try something new
Mhm.
and then find that wow, I'm actually pretty good at that, right?
Yeah, it was really, it was wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm happy to be singing. I don't sing a ton these days in terms of open mics or anything like that, but I do enjoy it when I can.
Wonderful. Let's talk about your TEDx talk that you gave. I know we have another question on there, but let's talk about the TEDx talk right now. What inspired you to decide to give a TEDx talk? And can you share with us the process of, applying to be a speaker and then working on that craft for preparing for your talk and what that was like?
Well, some of it was the fact that I follow, I mean, sometimes it's just knowing where to follow on social media sites and things like that. I followed Earlham College, where I went to college, many years later on a social media site, and they said, we're doing TEDx invites or whatever you call them, talks for
Yeah.
specific, if you audition, and I did it via video audition, and then did it in person later for the actual talk. Um, for the idea of redefining the defined was the theme of those TED Talks. And I thought about like, what have I really struggled with and could show my journey in terms of like something I didn't think I was or didn't think I could do, or and I didn't think I was creative for a long time. And I talk about it in that TED Talk because with my autism, I'm very, very literal.
Yeah.
I understand that any number of figures of speech or metaphors or a lot of things, the way that I put it in the talk was like, even if I sound a little bit like the character Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, who says things like, nothing goes over my head, my reflexes are too fast, I would catch them. Like it's super, super literal. Everything goes over his head
Right,
metaphorically.
right, right.
Um, Even if I sometimes sound like that, I've learned to value the differences in my idea of creativity and not just the similarities to other people. Like creativity, I think sometimes we can get artists and writers and thinkers, and a lot of people can get stuck in this box of thinking like we have to be creative in a certain way. Well, that's not necessarily like creativity prescription or prescription for creativity. It's about fitting in a box. For me, it's in theory, I can't believe I'm saying this because I don't really understand what this means, but it's speaking of metaphors, thinking outside the box of creativity that makes it more creative for me. So I said in my talk, for me, creativity is just anything that's different, like thoughts and actions that are different from the norm. And it's not that norms are bad,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, some norms are very, very valuable. Um, but thinking outside the proverbial or metaphorical box is very, very helpful for me, and just like letting go of the expectations of it needs to be creative in a certain way. Sometimes it's okay to just write it and revise it later. Like, okay, one of the things I want to impart on my and anyone who's listening for high school students or anything else, writing does not have to be perfect the first time. I've struggled
Mhm.
majorly with perfectionism.
Mm,
So, like when my TED talk, in terms of the process that you were asking about, I drafted a talk and ended up, I mean, I had some ad libs. It went a little over the prescribed amount of 18 minutes. I
yeah.
think it was 1905 or something like that. Um, and but I had a script that I worked hard to memorize. I was pacing all over the stage just without even thinking about it, like I often do. It's just how I manage anxiety. It's called stimming. There's different. Some people do it differently. They rock back and forth or whatever. Like there are different ways that different autistic people do it. But I think what helped me with that TED Talk was both practicing for it and having had experience on stage, including at Royce-Moore, whether it was the school musicals or plays or anything like that, or and especially at college, um, I sang some songs that also got standing ovations and things like that I'm really proud of. That I didn't think people would like necessarily, but that one, the main one, is in my TED talk now because it changed my idea of creativity. So I'll stop there.
Yeah. So, I mean, was it hard for you to prepare for that TED talk and memorize and, kind of learn how to present on stage like that?
Not really, because honestly, I didn't use like the standard like PowerPoint. I wanted to be more interactive.
Mm-hmm.
So I was used to talking to people. When I was younger, I was used to talking at people, but that's beside the point. But speaking to people in a way that was more interactive, I'd done that before, especially at conferences in grad school and a little bit at Earlham as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in 2010. Well, it doesn't matter, but there was a little conference that I did of McNair, of this program that invited all students, not just McNair scholars as they're called, to present on different research topics, and things like that, including with research papers at Roysmore and things like that, really helped prepare me for what I do now.
Perfect. So I'd like to journey back to when you were younger,
Mhm.
and your journey of discovering that you had something called autism, or that you have to live with this,
Mhm.
and understanding that, and kind of what that was like for you,
Mhm.
um to at a certain point in time, whenever it was, um have this label, right? Because people like to try to make sense of the world by
Yeah.
putting labels on things. And honestly, I think life is just so much more complex than any label that you can give things. But as a young person, to have this label, what was that like for you, and how did you work through that to be this incredible, confident, um, uh, successful person that you are today, where you're fully embracing the label and proud of it, and thriving?
Well, when I was younger, I didn't necessarily believe I was autistic, but I knew there was something different about me. Not wrong per se, but just different.
Yeah.
And I also struggled at times with mental illness and different things, but I knew that behaviorally there was something going on that I wasn't sure what it was, but I was just different from how I was acting and thinking and speaking and a lot of things from other kids. Um, I think when I started to accept it was towards the end of high school, like junior and senior year. I realized I might need to get like accommodations for extended test time or something like that in
Right.
college. So, and I started to realize like early in high school was when I was diagnosed by a doctor with it. Um, but I didn't want to believe I was a lot of things back then. But as I started to accept it, I started realizing it wasn't a bad label per se, like bad in quotes or anything like that.
Right.
But it was something that I think differently than other people, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And like I said in my TED talk, I wouldn't change my autism if I could. As frustrating as it's been at times, trying to interact with others and being misunderstood or me misunderstanding a lot of things or both, I wouldn't think the way I do in terms of creativity and music and writing and a lot of things were it not for this disability. And I don't think that's a bad thing to call it a disability or anything like that. But it's just part of who I am. I don't really have anything against it at this point. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, just so that this also becomes an additional learning opportunity for anyone who watches this recording, or who is on with us now, just like today, it's very common to ask people, what are your preferred pronouns?
Mhm.
Right? We would ask them that when we're introducing ourselves to them. Um, is there preferred language in terms of referencing the disability that you have?
Yeah, I talk about this in my TED talk. I say autistic people, not people with autism. I think often a lot of able-bodied people, and I understand if it's different in Royston or whatever, but the way I've often thought of this is that a lot of able-bodied people have told the disabled community, you need to call yourselves people with disabilities because it sounds more polite or something like that. I don't agree. I believe in identity first language. It's part of who I am. I don't think it's bad or anything like that to say I'm autistic. It's not a bad label at all. For some people, it may be more problematic. It was for me earlier in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but to call myself autistic, like I said, like in high school, I didn't believe I was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but looking back now, I think identity first language is the language I prefer, and as opposed to person first language.
Okay.
I also don't like the term. I mentioned this in my TED Talk too about gradations like high functioning and low functioning of autism or something like that. I don't believe everyone's a little bit autistic or anything like that. I do believe that what gets called Asperger's syndrome, I don't like that term for a bunch of reasons. That's what I was initially diagnosed with before it got erased from I believe it was the DSM-5 or
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I think one of the reasons I don't like it is that, among other things, Hans Asperger was a Nazi who like did like a lot of things on, I won't get too much into it, but just children to send them to concentration camps and stuff in World War II. But moreover, I see autism as a spectrum on which all all autistic people fit in different ways. It's not a matter of high functioning or low functioning. That's neurotypical standards. That's like what other people call me, but I just call
Right.
myself autistic.
Yeah. So thinking back to, when at what age were you said you were in high school when you
14, yeah.
so you were 14. So how was that presented to you?
Um, I don't know what I can go into detail about, but I will say this: like my parents and other people, like doctors and everything, told me it was, and I just flatly refused and resented the label. But I realized later on, like when I read more about it, I was like, yeah, I definitely qualify as that, which is not bad. It's
Okay.
what it is. Yeah.
Okay. So if you had to do a rewind,
Hmm.
uh, or if you were to give advice to teachers or parents um, in how they might talk with a young person who's just, they're learning for the first time
Hmm.
that they are an autistic person, is there um, is there something that you would give them? Is there advice that you would have for them?
To the autistic person or to the parents or
Yeah, to the parents or the teachers, because
hmm.
we always want to, know, um, in thinking about conversations with someone that may be challenging conversations, it's good for us to put ourselves in their shoes as much as possible and think like, how are they going to receive this information? How can I present some information so it is going to be received in the best possible way? So is there any advice that you would give in that regard?
I'm not sure I know about what to say about like how to like give somebody a diagnosis or make them receive it a certain way. But I will say this for parents and other educators and everybody else: listen to autistic people, because there are so many organizations that I don't want to name or anything, but I feel like they claim to, well, among other things, speak for autistic people without having autistic people on their board. And that's really messed up. So
Mm,
the idea is, if you're looking for resources, for example, for autistic people, there are support groups and things like that from organizations like GRASP. I think it's like Greater Regional, either Autism Spectrum or Asperger Syndrome Partnership, I believe. And there are other organizations too. I think Autistic Self Advocacy Network is another one,
mhm.
ASAN, that actually are run by autistic people and actually have good information for autistic people as resources. So one of the things I would say to parents is provide your child or whatever with some resources in case they don't feel comfortable talking about it or anything like that, online or anything else. That's what I would say.
Oh, that's great advice. Thank you for that. And I wonder if Sarah can maybe in the background, if there are any links to these organizations that, and also a link to Josh's TED Talk. So we can provide that to, oh, jazz hands. We can provide that to anybody who's watching, because we certainly want all of our friends and family members to have an opportunity to learn from you, Josh. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
There's a fun question that was posed in the chat. So I will read it to you. It says, you're planning a dinner party to geek out about music and can choose anyone, living or dead. Who would be your 3 guests? And what do you think the first topic might be?
Wow, I'm trying to think of people who are full of stories. Certainly Quincy Jones could be one.
Yeah.
Who's I've worked with everybody from like Frank Sinatra to Michael Jackson to like rappers and a lot of other people, jazz musicians. He could be one. I don't know if I could pick. I'm trying to think. That's a hard one. Maybe Joni Mitchell, who's maybe my favorite songwriter. She is incredible in terms of the way she tells stories and a lot of other things. I don't know if I could pick a third right now, but maybe Paul McCartney or Bob Dylan. I don't know. Brian Wilson, Stevie Wonder. They're all, whatever genius is, I think they could all fit in different ways.
Great
What do you
choice.
think the first topic might be? Go ahead.
No, I just said great choices.
Yeah.
So yeah, what topic?
I'm trying to think of a question about like a peak of creativity for them. Like, tell me a time in your life when you felt your creativity was at its peak. Maybe that other people didn't understand or something along those lines. Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm going to turn that question on you.
Oh God.
Can you tell us about a time in your life so far where you felt your creativity was at its peak?
Whew. Well, certainly the night that I first did, I don't know if it was my creativity was at its peak, but where I felt most rewarded in the opposite way of being not understood was the first night I ever performed the song that's in my TED Talk, which I wrote about being autistic. People didn't know necessarily that I was autistic at that point. I hadn't like been outed or come out about it. But I sang that song on March 7th, 2009, 11 years to the day before that TED Talk. And played it again in the TED Talk. And I'll never forget seeing these bodies rise at the end cheering. And I just thought it was just some self-centered song about me. I hadn't sung it since I wrote it for 2 years. I didn't think anybody would appreciate it. So that was the opposite experience. It was all so rewarding.
You just gave me goosebumps. That's so great.
I'll just say this. I met a couple years ago, I tried writing a memoir of like, or at least a diary or something, the top 40 music moments in my life. That was number 1. Yes. There are a lot of contenders.
Yeah, terrific. Terrific. So I'm thinking now about like all of these things that you've, thought about writing, that you have written. What is on the docket for your next project? Do you have a next book, or like, is there a book topic that is kind of burning inside of you that you really want to write about?
Well, a couple answers to that. In terms of a book, if I ever do like a PhD program or something, I don't know if I will, but just as a thought, I've thought about writing a dissertation and or a book about language of race in music criticism and historiography, like how different historians and critics and different people who write about music kind of code things as better or worse with language that might sound like praise, but is actually putting certain people down or things like that. So that's one idea. Right now, I just got an invitation, a personal invitation yesterday via email to resubmit an article that I wrote months ago that got published in June about the author James Baldwin, who's probably my favorite writer. I wrote it about his writing in music, writing about music.
Yeah.
And the editor of a journal called James Baldwin Review contacted me saying, we would love for you to expand this a bit and rework it and whatever, and to get it submitted, published in our journal, which is a huge honor. So there's that. And then I'm working on a blog every 2 weeks or so, twice a month. I'm publishing something on my Substack, sometimes getting republished at the Good Men Project. I'm thinking about writing a 2021 gratitude post or something along those lines. Speaking of gratitude journals that I did in middle school with Mrs. Borges, later Miss Lacatuda.
Oh,
Um,
like,
yeah, she was great. And also thinking about writing something about writing, like imposter syndrome and writing.
mm,
Because I think a lot of people struggle with, like, whether it's autism or anything else, they think like, I can't write, I'm not good at this or whatever. So some of the tricks that I've learned through to work through that, if there are any. Um,
that would be amazing.
yeah.
Because I think everybody struggles with imposter syndrome to a certain extent,
Mhm.
no matter what level of success you've achieved. There's those inside voices, those voices inside your head that are saying, I'm not worthy. I What am I doing here? I'm not to the same caliber as so and so. And the advice is always just, lean into it, own it.
Yeah.
You are worthy. But I think it's still a struggle for
Yeah.
many of us. I certainly will admit to that myself many times.
Yeah, absolutely. And because like I always knew I loved to write, but that doesn't mean I was always aware that like what I wrote was quote unquote good or that it helped other people. One of my main, I mean, speaking of service learning and things like that at Royce, one of my main goals these days is to be useful to others. So I hope my sharing my story and different things like that in different essays and writing and a lot of things is helpful. That's my ultimate goal.
Being of service to the world.
Something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that is certainly inspiring to me, and I think to anybody who's listening here. I want to encourage anybody who has questions to pop them in the chat. We're getting towards the end of our time together with Josh, so we want to make sure that we answer any questions you might have. But Josh, you had mentioned when we were just kind of catching up before the start of our conversation that's being streamed today, that you were involved in a number of extracurricular activities at
Yeah.
Rosemore. What can you share with us that you were involved in?
Math club. I think there was a French club at the time. I don't know if there still is, but um, the main two in high school were yearbook. I was a co-editor senior year, and Scholastic Bowl. My team, not because of me, but because of a number of, not just me or a number of other people, but it was as a team, we got the first ever regional championship for Royce Moore
Yay!
Scholastic Bowl. And I credit a number of the other teammates on that with just, they taught me a lot about a lot of things, including science and math and other things. And I was like the music and literature guy, I think, but for whatever it's worth. And also yearbook, I'll never forget, I mentioned this in terms of my memories, when in senior year, I got to give the yearbook dedication to someone who had told me he felt kind of underappreciated in the upper school. It
Mm,
was Jeff Giles, who taught fourth grade for many years, I believe, mostly fourth grade, and sometimes sixth grade math and other things. And I knew him from different, like he taught my sixth grade math class and other things, and I rode on his bus for years. And seeing how much it touched him really meant a lot to me.
oh, that's terrific. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think to this day, I mean, we have a lot of kids who are on yearbook,
Yeah.
and they come in before school starts uh, each day to get together and work on that very, very important project. And um, we recently had an admissions morning event, and uh, we had a number of kids from another school who actually they all came here en masse for a special admissions morning for them. And a number of the students, the high school students that were on the panel, are on yearbook, just so
Hmm.
happened. And they were, to a number of them, talking about how much yearbook, being on yearbook, meant to them,
Mhm.
and that they hadn't necessarily thought of it until that moment, that the huge responsibility they have for telling the Royce Moore story.
Mhm.
That, if you can see behind me here on this shelf,
See those yearbooks, yeah.
those are all of the yearbooks, and right here on my desk is the very first yearbook
Wow.
from 1919. And so it is a hugely important responsibility to tell the story
Mhm.
of Royce Moore, and you're part of that. And so, making the decision of who to dedicate that yearbook to, I think the kids take great pride in that process. It sounds like it goes back to when you were
Oh,
um,
yeah.
involved.
And I just want to send a shout out to the other yearbook dedicatee from that year, which was Karen Burns. She's wonderful also. I'm sure still like really helpful with community service and a lot of other things too. So
We just had a meeting with her this morning right before our Zoom. So
yeah.
awesome, awesome. Well, Josh, it has been such a pleasure to have you on Griffin Greats this
Thank you so
morning.
much.
Thank you so much. We're excited about your path, which is really only at its beginning.
Yeah.
So much ahead of you. Really exciting, bright path ahead, and you are an inspiration to us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was honored to be here.
I have one last question for you,
Yeah.
and that is, how do you define success?
Persistence. I wrote an article about this and I was reminded, and it mentioned Royce Moore and Mr. Becker actually, from when I was there. He used to, I don't know if you still do this for like different awards or whatever, before the Headmaster's Award for the most outstanding senior, he always had this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. I know the difference. Sorry. I've been thinking about Ralph Ellison for other reasons, but Ralph Waldo Emerson has this quote about what is success? It is this and this and and so I think about that. But for me, the most important thing with success is not giving up, and also just keep going and working through obstacles, not overcoming. I haven't overcome my autism. I don't like saying that,
Right.
but working through different issues to get like the thing that got me through a lot of rough years in some ways was hope. And so coupled with persistence, I think that two have served me very, very well.
Oh, that's beautiful. And
Mm,
excellent advice for any of our young students who are watching this.
mm.
So, Josh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Happy holidays to you. All the best for 2022,
Same to all Voice more, yeah.
and all the best for all of us as we march into a new year, hopefully much better year for us all. All right. Take
Thank
care.
you.